Okay, everybody, I'm back. Brand new Take Aim Outdoor Podcast. And this week I have Sarge Vasquez with me, who is a deer biologist out of Arkansas, has worked in Texas on some of the biggest deer hunting ranches in the world. But we have a great conversation about CWD, so make sure you join in, listen. We get into the CWD about 4 minutes into the show, so make sure you pay attention and get involved. Now, everybody, we are back and live, brand new Take Aim podcast. As always, I'm Brandon Hammond, your host, and excited to have my long-time buddy on the phone, Sarge Vasquez. What's up, Sarge?
How's it going, Bub?
I'm doing good, man. Excited to have you back on the show. Thank you.
Thanks, man. Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
Not a problem, man. But, Sarge, for those of out there in the world that don't know who you are and what you do, explain that real quick, and then we'll kind of get into the topic of the day.
My background is I'm a wildlife biologist. I was a private biologist for a bunch of I'd say 4 hunting ranches in South Texas that I consulted for. I now work for the federal government, and I also still privately consult for some ranches in South Texas.
That's phenomenal. I know that for as long as I've known you, you've done work in Texas and on a lot of those ranches, which are huge, relatively speaking, to what we do up here, like in Michigan. But Sarge, tell me a little bit, if you would, before we dive into this topic we're going to dive into, but tell me a little bit about maybe what's new in Texas on some of the property down there, and what's changed in the 15 years that I've known you.
Well, as far as deer management, I think Texas is one of the meccas that exists for whitetail deer management. We have the luxury of having really good colleges down there that have professors that provide us with really good sound data on management decisions. And so with that, just management in general in South Texas or in all of Texas has just gotten better. We have proof now as far as numbers of, what we're doing as far as management, whether it's, culling or, how to grow big deer down there, So the proof's in the pudding. Everybody wants to go to Texas to shoot a big deer. And it's because I think the longevity of management has been there.
Yeah, that is cool. Sarge, would you say that obviously you guys have had, a history of management that dates over, what would you say, Sarge, over 100 years at this point in Texas?
For sure. Yes, sir.
Yeah.
The King Ranch started, and now the daddy of all, wildlife management ranches in the world. They've been actively managing for wildlife, I want to say since the early 1900s. They've been doing it that long.
Yeah, that's amazing. That is totally amazing. So now you're in this modern era where I would assume for you guys a big thing is that's probably even in the 15 years I've known you is how you guys record and track data has probably changed tremendously.
Yeah, we went from, just visually assessing stuff to recording. Now, we can send either known tooth wear, or you can send the teeth in, send him an eye that they can do, so you can know exactly how old the deer were when they were harvested. And I think that's one of the things that we do a lot of in South Texas, or the ranches that I consult for, is we're more age management, I guess, than antler restrictions. It's simple, but now we have numbers to prove it. But the older deer gets, the bigger they get, and of course there's a time period when they start falling back off. But if you don't let them get older, you'll never know how big they can get. And so we base a lot of our harvest recommendations on aging our deer first, and then looking at what we need to cull, what the property can carry as far as numbers matters a whole lot, because It's also the quality of the groceries that they're getting, quality of habitat, quality nutrition, all that plays into it. But the number one factor that I think that you'll see on these ranches is they've got a really good age structure.
Yeah, that's huge. I know I have a partner that, I film with. We have a local show based out of Michigan here, and a lot of it's based on management. And one of the things we talk about all the time, and in the future, we actually just talked about this yesterday, Sarge, which is really funny, not me and you, but me and him, that we were going to preach more of age and how important that is, that at any point a 5-year-old or a 6-year-old could change, and put on 40 inches in a year, which isn't common. I'm talking the upper end, best deer on earth, 1%ers, I guess. But you don't know until you give that deer that ample opportunity to age. And if you kill him at 3 or 4, you'll never know what he could have been. And I know for Michigan it's super hard, but you guys can achieve that a lot better in Texas. And you guys kill deer that are, very common. What would you say, Sarge, 6, 7 years old all the time?
Yes, sir. There's parts of Texas that aren't as strictly managed, but, on our ranches, when I talk to the landowners and we come up with a harvest management plan, most of the trophies that we're taking are 5.5 plus. And there will have criteria on it. If it's 5.5 and it's just not producing what they want to produce, then we'll call him, we'll call that deer mature. But, most of the time you look at a 6.5, 7.5-year-old deer under the right conditions. I mean, and just think about what that deer can express if you hit it right, where you got the right rainfall, and then you got, the properties producing the right vegetation and nutrition for these deer, and then if you're providing any kind of supplemental nutrition for these deer, they can really express, what their true genetics, want them to be. And that's a lot of talk about genetics, but you really don't know what's out there until you let it fully express itself, which is through age.
Yep, absolutely. Before I get carried away, Sarge, with the age deal and management and getting off track, me and you are going to talk about chronic wasting disease today, CWD. So let me just switch gears because I could talk about that awesome stuff in management forever, especially with you. But I wanted to get you on the phone and talk about chronic wasting disease and express some of the things maybe we do know or kind of overlook, and the common stuff to look for, and the stuff that you see on that side of the coin being a deer biologist, and what should we do as a community of hunters to kind of track this or lead the way to help biologists maybe find a cure?
I guess I'll start this off with saying that there's a lot of different trains of thoughts on CWD, and we can all go on where it came from, how it got here, what it really is. But the one thing that I'd like to get everybody on board is it's not going to go away. So what we need to do is help whatever state agency is looking for the CWD, whether it's your local game and fish or resource management officials, but help them collect the data that's needed. Because until we have a clear picture of what it is, how it gets there, and that's just going to be through number of harvests and people sending the samples in. And so without that data, it's a guessing game. And I think that's why we are where we are with CWD. It's just it's very young in its stage of us knowing exactly what it is. So the more numbers, hunters are out there all season long and they're harvesting deer, and it's real easy to just not send a sample in of the brain tissue, or finding a resource officer or a game and fish officer and saying, hey, I'd like to turn this in for sampling, because and I'm sure here in the South, I'm in Arkansas now, and in these areas it's free testing. Bring your deer in, and it's like, why not? You want to know that it's there if it's there, and a lot of people have the mindset of, well, what we don't know, don't don't hurt us, or I don't want anybody to know that it's here because we're going to change this and change that. Well, until we get a full grasp of what it is and how to try to manage it, and we need the hunters to help us tell that story.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you made a really great point about the actual disease itself being young and what we don't know about it. And I think me and you talked yesterday, Sarge, and we said it was maybe the 1950s or 60s that the disease was actually found. So when you think about it, that's just, 60 years ago, basically,
Yep.
the disease was found in a captive deer, I believe, in a mule deer in Colorado. So yeah, that doesn't give much time when you think of they didn't know what it was 60 years ago to finally diagnose something, come up with even the name, and go from there. But a big thing for all of us is really, Sarge, kind of what you just tapped into is us, the hunting community, being very proactive about reaching out and getting you guys that kind of information, because without it, like you said, there's no research to be done, and you guys can't move forward as a group.
Right, and then what we do is do what everybody else does is guess how to control it. And so we've got to harvest deer, we've got to reduce numbers so it's not transmitted. The form of transmission and how it gets from one deer to another. We're finding out how that's happening, but we still don't know a whole lot. I mean, the best way, it's what's called a prion, and it's a protein that can live in the soil. So the best way I can, I guess, generalize the term is kind of like if you've got a pet, a dog, and it's kind of like parvo. Where you don't know where the parvo is, but it can kill your puppy. So the beauty of it, we can keep our dog indoors or very confined small areas until he gets its vaccinations, and then he's okay. But with deer, they're not held. I mean, they're wild. They can go wherever they want. We don't know where the prion's at, and so that's what we're trying to find out through testing is where are the hot spots? What do we need to look for, and why is that a hot spot versus somewhere else? Why is it popping up in little pockets, of a population of deer in a certain county, but not the neighboring county, but 10 counties away, another one will pop up. For instance, this was supposed to be only in the United States, and I think in 2016, a CWD popped up on a cervid in Europe. So, how did it get there? The assumption is maybe it was always there, but why is it rearing its ugly head now? Well, now we know what to test for, what we're looking for, and that's what we need. The hunters that are out there harvesting, mass number of these animals. Hey, have them tested. That's how we'll know.
Yeah, that is true. I mean, how would you know? And like you said, that was such a great way of explaining it. Is there's not like a bright yellow light going off, flashing like warning signs. There's a CWD pyron here in this location.
Yeah.
So that is really hard to combat, and like you said, we probably won't be able to combat it. Hopefully, we can just find a long-term curve or some kind of antibacterial type of shot or something to help the deer. But it's such a weird case to think that like you guys literally have to wait to get a report. How do you fight something like that?
Yeah, and then it still has to go through its life cycle, right? So a deer, like I said, it could live on a blade of grass that grew in that soil, or a weed, and the deer cruises by and eats that weed, and it's transmitted through, whether it's urine or saliva or fecal matter, whatever the deer does, as he's cruising through or she's cruising through, we don't know. But a year later or 2 years, it doesn't go away. 3 years later, I don't know, but a deer will eat that one plant that grew up through there, and guess what? Now it's infected, and it's got to go through a cycle. So for the mate, I don't know how long it takes for a deer quote unquote show the signs or get sick, but you could, harvest that animal and not know it even has CWD. I'm sure, and I'm willing to bet my paycheck that at some point in this country, somebody's harvested a deer with CWD and not had it tested, take it home and fed it to their family.
Right.
Not ever known, because it's kind of like us with cancer. We don't know we have it a lot of times, so we go to the doctor and they do a test. Oh, hey, by the way, you've got cancer. Now let's try to figure out what we got to do to, get it rid. How far along is it? We don't know until we go see a doctor. Deer don't have a doctor they can go see. So,
right.
When we're out there and we're harvesting, animals and, we kill however many your license allows you to kill, it's really good to have a sample drawn from each of those deer. A lot of times the DNR, or Game and Fish, whatever your entity is called in your state, will do the testing for free. So you just would do yourself a service to know, because the truth is, and you and I talked about this yesterday, Brandon, if you shoot a deer that's walking circles and having saliva come out of its mouth and not knowing where it's at, and you kill it to put it out of its misery, and then you're like, well, I don't know if I want to eat that. Let me have it tested for CWD, and it comes back positive. Are you still going to eat that meat? You're probably not. You're
right.
probably going to discard it and say, no, I don't want to eat that because I know something's wrong with it. But the truth is, we don't know how many that have been killed before they've expressed anything that have been taken home to be eaten. So it's just good to have something to back you up and know that you can have it tested. That way biologists get a hold of the numbers, and we'll know if there's a hot spot or there's not. We'll know, where to concentrate our efforts on how to take care of the CWD. And right now, a lot of the state mindsets are to go in and just try to kill every animal there so they can, try to get rid of the CWD in an area. But, a lot of times, does that work? I don't know. I don't have a really good answer for whether, trying to get rid of a population of the deer in areas will work to get rid of CWD. Because, like I said, it's going to always live in the ground. It's a prion, and I don't know how many times we've talked about deer management in Texas, but I remember growing up and going hunting, and I'd be lucky if I saw a deer. And now on the same ranch, a good day we're seeing, 10 to 12 mature trophy animals. So they came back, is what I'm saying.
Right.
So, it's just a mindset that we just got to know where they're at, and then through data try to figure out, because if we're not trying, we're not doing anything.
Right. And I know the issue of eradicating an area seems to be the topic, and it seems to be, the topic of being that's your guys' main go-to. And I don't mean that in a negative. It's we don't have another go-to, right? So when you think about that, Sarge, obviously that's a conflict of so many things: the state's income, the landowners that probably purchase land to hunt. It's so complex. It's almost hard to talk about. And I know, as you know, Sarge, there was a big deal, several years ago in Wisconsin. Do you remember, Sarge, what it was? Maybe 8 miles they eradicated.
Yeah.
I want to say it was 8 miles. Maybe it was 10 even, but it's somewhere right in that ballpark.
Yeah. And you look at Texas, where they have these high fenced areas or pen raised deer, and whatever the business is, that some of it, are hunting ranches, and some of them are not. Some of them they're producing, deer in breeding for whatever other byproduct that they want to have. I have personal friends that raise deer, and it reared its ugly head in Texas at one point, and I know I heard of personal friends losing entire businesses because the state came in and shot every deer on their place. And I personally don't agree with that, but if that's their only, like I said, they're not trying. If we get it wrong, let's try something else.
Right.
I know that there's live testing now for captive deer, but we talked about it, and a lot of my friends that have deer breeding facilities, it's 98.6% accurate. and, stem cell is 99.9. It's still not perfect. It's one, not even a whole percentage point difference in it. But, it just seems that the states are deciding that's the easy way to go. And like I said, I personally don't agree with it, because there's other diseases that have reared their ugly heads, like EHD, and I want to say it was the Milk River in Montana that, it killed a entire deer population, I want to say, on the Milk River.
Yeah, you're right. It has.
The deer population is just now coming back from that outbreak. So it's not saying that CWD is the only disease out there that can do this to deer herds, but like EHD, I think the first confirmed case was in 1890. We know a lot about it. We know how it's transmitted. You know how it gets from one deer, and it's viral. And so, if there's something that they can do when they're going to suspect an outbreak, maybe there's something they can do to put out there for the deer. I don't know what they would do in Montana, but, we know a lot more about EHD than we do CWD. And I think that's the issue with CWD. It's new. We don't know a lot about it, and we don't know a lot about it. It's scary. And so everybody's just trying to figure out a way to do something. And anytime you have a topic like this, you're going to have two sides that aren't going to agree. No matter what the topic is, whether it's gun control or birth control or whoever you're going to marry, everybody's got a side. And unfortunately for us as hunters and as resource managers, we should all be on the same side, but that doesn't always happen.
Yeah, for sure. Now, Sarge, when we talk about data and what you guys have learned over the years from CWD, is there anything yet that we have found any kind of commonality of more in does, more in male bucks, more in upper age deer, younger age deer? Is there anything that has come across as significant data that just kind of communicates anything to you guys yet?
The ability to capture data on these deer is so small. The sample size, I guess, that they're, when you find a deer with CWD, they almost know, I think in Arkansas, I was reading some of the cases in what counties that they've encountered CWD, and it was like this was in a 2.5-year-old doe, and this was in a 3.5-year-old buck. So they know the deer, in sample size. They know, it's small numbers, and so, we're starting to find out a little bit through those small numbers, but it's just so erratic. They just came up. I just heard this year they had a CWD case in Mississippi, and how did it get there? We don't know. And I think that's the issue. Just the sheer numbers aren't there to tell us any story yet.
Right.
And that's the hard. That's just really the hard part of this disease is it's young. We just now know how to test for it. In the last 20 years, really. And it's become a hot subject in the last 5 really. You
right.
Think about it.
Yeah, it has totally. Last 5 years, you've heard a lot about it. And another thing, Sarge, that kind of we want to talk about was just the fact that this doesn't just happen during, like as you've said, hunting season. Deer can get this at any time. So us as a group, even though we're not hunting, if you live in an area where there's deer, I always look at deer regardless, but keep your eyes open and report anything you see any time in the year. Just because it's not hunting season doesn't mean they don't get CWD.
Right. And and Brandon, a lot of times you think about what we do as hunters, but we'll have, I know I've got 10 game cameras, but as soon as hunting season over, we take them down and we bring them in, and it's good sometimes to, instead of taking pictures, switch them over to video record and take some videos, of your hunting area just to see if behavior is the same throughout the year. Go back and check. Number one, you get good data throughout the year. You get to watch the buck that you want to harvest grow into his antlers, but then you also get to see, if they're all acting normal, or are they, is there anything going on in the area that might tip you off? Like you said, because it could be the middle of summer and a deer start expressing signs of CWD. You may want to, talk to somebody about that video clip. I was talking to, as early as last week, I was at a meeting, and I met a gentleman from an agency called APHIS, Animal Plant Health Services, and they do a lot of hog eradication for the federal government, along with, they're tied into some of the CWD eradication. And this guy has been with his agency for 52 years, and he really didn't even have a whole lot of answers about it because the subject came up. He said he thought in his mind early on that it must be something that these mature animals are expressing, and why, that might also lead into why there's not a lot of mature animals in some states. Yeah, there's due to overharvest of younger animals, but he said, just the older they get, they just can't fight off the disease. Because, but when we're sampling these deer, we're looking, they're all ages are getting it. So there's not just only mature deer coming up with CWD or only young deer coming up with CWD. It's throughout the whole age spectrum that they're getting samples that are hot back on.
Right. Yeah. So that kind of washes out that guy's theory, so to speak.
Yeah, and that's what we were talking about. He goes, in my mind, I thought this was it, but it's not, and it leads back to, we don't know anything about it again, and what we think we know is it's being proven wrong through the data that we're getting, which is good, because now we know that we're trying to get rid of some of the misconceptions, and I'm hoping that will help us get through some of the misconceptions of eradicating, a species in an area that, that deserves to be there, because I personally don't feel like that's the best approach.
Right. And it when you really think about it, Sarge, it makes you wonder, too, which I hadn't even thought of it, like there's a possibility there's probably a deer out there that has had CWD and survived it. That's, somewhere, somehow.
You just never know. I mean, you hear stories about us as humans, having a disease and then all of a sudden coming back and, the disease has gone away or they're cured, and we're able to thank God for laying his healing hands on us. But, I don't know if a deer can get on his deer knees and pray. So I don't know how that happens,
Right. Yeah, I don't either. But, I mean, it's just a possibility. And sadly, deer can't tell us to come track data on it and take medical records. Yeah,
we'll never know. You're absolutely correct. We'll never know if a deer has at one point had CWD. And that's the thing about the testing methods that most of these states use, number one, because it's cheaper. But, it takes, you got to kill the animal. It's done through the brain stem, right? It's a brain sample. So the more expensive route is, I know that they're able to draw blood on some of these captive deer, and it's not as accurate, but it's pretty close. But we don't know if a deer's ever had it unless it's been tested, whether it's had it. And most of the deer that have been tested are dead already because they got shot.
Right. Yep. Exactly. Now I know you said that you're in Arkansas now and you still work in Texas, but in Arkansas you guys are doing free testing. But necessarily that doesn't mean it's mandatory, correct? It just means if you choose, you guys will do it.
Correct. And that's what it is. It's not a mandatory. You don't have to have every deer checked in. As a matter of fact, I'm not 100% sure, but I know when I first moved to Arkansas, they had check stations where people actually went in and checked their deer in. And they've gone on to this online check system where, this the beauty of a smartphone, but they've got an app. Arkansas Game and Fish has an app, and you put it on your phone, and you can check your deer in and say, hey, I believe it's 2.5 or 3.5 years old. It's an 8-point, and it was harvested on this day, and then you get a check number, and they're able to, log that data in. But at that point, it's up to you whether you want to have that deer tested for CWD. And I know in the state of Arkansas, you can go to a check station or a game and fish office, and they will sample that deer for free.
Yep,
Which
absolutely.
I believe if you've got the time to, I would recommend it because we need the data. I think the state needs the data to make good decisions. I've been able to talk to some of the biologists in our area about and we don't, and even as biologists, we don't all agree on the same methods of what we want to do with CWD. But regardless, the one thing that we do all agree on is we need more data and we need more real numbers. And the only way we get that is through harvest and through the hunters. We need the hunters' help.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, Sarge, do you guys have internally, state to state, is there any sort of coalition where you guys co-op together or anything like that to talk about this and some of the progress maybe some of the other states are making?
Funny you say that. I was talking to another friend of mine that's a deer biologist, and he's in Florida, and they had a deer summit. I want to say I can't remember exactly where that was in Mississippi. I did not attend, but they all got together and they talked about a whole bunch of different hot deer topics, and CWD was one. And so a lot of the state agencies attend this. And it's also done. There's presentations by some of the top deer biologists in the country. I know some of my old professors were there also giving presentations. So, it was a good meeting. I have yet to talk to my buddies that were there. What's actually come out of it, but they do have meetings and summits where they do get together and they do share data and things about what they know. So, we can pull what we need from other states, maybe what somebody's doing that's been successful and what other people are doing that may not be. I'm fortunate, Brandon, that I get to sit on the sidelines and just, judge. I'm not with a state agency, but having the background that I have, I'm smart enough to know whether I think personally anyway, can see if something's going to work or not, and luckily I'm not one with a state agency that has to make a decision, because I know that once they do that, we as hunters get to scrutinize every decision they make, and so, I say on that aspect, we need to sit back and let those guys do their work, and ladies do their work, and support them and try to get them the data they need. So hopefully we can get the whole story can be told, and once the whole story's told, we'll know as hunters, what we need to do, and they'll know as biologists what they need to do, and everybody in between, can meet somewhere in the middle.
Yeah, ultimately, you're absolutely spot on, Sergeant. And hunters love to use the term conservation all the time, and I think a big deal with conservation is us working with, state agencies, biologists, giving you guys the data. That is the epitome of conservation if we're trying to lead the fight for you guys to get this data and find some kind of cure to keep, our deer species healthy for the next several generations.
Yeah, exactly. And until we got somebody putting pen to paper and getting real hard data, because if there's any interest from any group that does an independent study, whoever's funding that, it's gonna skew the numbers. You know how that works. But if we're just taking what we harvest and say, does it have this and where did it come from, we can start to use those numbers to narrow down what is in that area. Not that this has to do with CWD, but I know that on some of the ranches in the past that I've managed, I would have my hunters, when they harvest an animal, take a GPS point, and I want to know where that deer was when he was shot, what he weighed, what he scored, and how old he was. And we started plotting that on a map, and we started noticing that there's certain parts of the property, and you'll know this if you've got a big enough property that you're hunting. Oh, that side of the ranch has always got the big deer. Why? Why does it have that? And we started going in there and we started doing some brush sampling, and we started noticing that, well, the soils had changed, the protein content in the brush had changed, and the variability in the plants had changed. So the deer in that part of the ranch were getting more nutrition than the deer on the other side. So, but we started finding pockets of it. And so how do we replicate what's going on there on other parts of the ranch? so we can have more uniformity in quality and nutrition and size. But the same thing will go for CWD until we start plotting points on a map and seeing where the hot spots are and why and what is there. You know, I don't know a lot about this prine and how it lives in the ground. Personally, from what I've read, you know, I don't know. It's not indicative to any kind of soil type. I don't know. You know, what if it starts to be? Then we know what to look for. You know, what if it's certain kinds of vegetation that it can? I don't know. But what if there is? And so we need to start looking. We need the data to know. You know, we need data to know where was it harvested. You know, what were the conditions? Was it a wet year? Was it a dry year? Will the CWD express itself more in a dry year or in a wet year? You know, common sense would think that in a wet year it might spread more. I don't know. I don't know we don't know enough about what it is. At least where I'm sitting, I don't know enough about it yet.
Yeah, for sure. And you know, to kind of reflect overall this conversation, Sarge, it comes back to over and over, you have said the word data, and there just isn't enough of it. So I just, you know, like myself, I urge every fellow hunter I know and everybody that listens to this podcast, man, if you can do something, do it and contribute. And, you know, that's all we can do is try to lead the way and be in front of this disease. And there's such a lack of data out there that we all have to pitch in.
You know, and Brandon, our culture as hunters, we tend to be more secretive. We like our spots. We don't want nobody to know where they're at. We work hard to grow the deer in our spots. We work hard to manage the land around our hunting areas that we've got time, we've got money invested. So we're a little more secretive as I guess as hunters, we're just built that way. But until we were able to tell the story on this, I would hate for some people to take a mindset, well, it's really not that big of a deal, or it's not in my state yet, or because we don't know if it is or not, and that's the thing. And if it is, and it starts to wipe out a whole deer population, you don't want to wait 8 or 9 years after you've invested that much money and time and effort on your hunting property, and it could be gone in a matter of months because the deer, you know, all got CWD. That's the scary part of this. And I'm not trying to make this into a scary, you know, all the deer are going to die type of thing. But, I mean, it happened on the Milk River in Montana with a different disease. It's happened in, you know, that 8-mile stretch where the agency came in and did that. But, you know, we never know what the full capacity of CWD could do. And right now we know that it's killing deer and it's spreading.
Right.
So we need the hunter's help on knowing if something has it or not. And right now, the avenue to get it done is free. You know, at least here in Arkansas, I know it is. Take a deer you've harvested in, and they'll sample it. And
I believe as such in Michigan too, Sarge. Even though I believe the locations are limited, but I do know they're testing for it for guys that bring in deer in 2 designations that I know of. So, you know, in Michigan, you guys are here hunting. You know, look it up, see if that area is close to you to where you guys can check in your deer and get it CWD tested as well. But like Sarge said, there was a case in Europe that popped up this year that had never been there. How did CWD get there? So, you know, it's just insane what could happen. So, again, we just got to lead the fight, and you guys can't do your job if the hunters aren't doing their part.
Yep. And on my end, like I said, I being a hunter as well, you know, I applaud all the hunters that have done their part in conservation, because conservation is more than just what you do on your property. You know, we've got to conserve, you know, all of our natural resources for the future, for our children and our children's children, our children's grandchildren. And the way we do that is, I think, get on the forefront of this and you know, bring the data in so we know what's going on.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think you just said it exactly right. Like, being a part of this show with you, Sarge, is conservation. Having one of the, you know, listeners taking one deer to get tested is conservation. So I just hope everybody takes part, and you know, this gives us a great medium to reach people. And And Sarge, I know you're busy as heck this time of year, but man, thanks, buddy, for your knowledge and your time today. It's always awesome spending time with you.
No, man, I appreciate it too, bub. Anytime.
Absolutely. And guys, we'll be back next week. Make sure to check us out, Outdoor Podcast Channel, podbros.com. And thanks again, Sarge. And I'll make sure to tag you where I can when the show's out. Thanks, buddy.
Yes, sir. Appreciate it.